And then the third thing that I realized the second time I watched the scene, you can hear the crowd chanting as the white lights come in to
Mhm.
end the movie. They go from applauding to saying, "Nina,
Yeah.
Nina, Nina," and, like, that's a sports thing, that's not a
Yeah.
ballet thing. I
No.
don't see, like, Radio City Music Hall
No.
seeing a ballet and chanting the first name of, like,
That
"Nina,
I've been to
Nina."
many
Yeah.
ballets, that's never happened. Most
Yeah.
people don't even know the name of the main dancers.
And I think that's a sign at the end that she's still hallucinating,
Yeah.
that Lily's reaction and Toma's reaction, like, "Oh my god, are you," and then she goes into the light and everyone's
Because she
saying,
believes
"Nina,
she's
Nina."
so
She,
yeah.
like, yeah, I think that's a sign that none of it is real at that point with the stabbing or with the
So
blood.
then you could make the argument, did she ever dance that night?
That is the last theory I wanted to get into. So there's a hot take floating around on the internet that assumes that there are different theories. So one is that, like, the entire dance, the all
Mhm.
3 acts are imagined,
Yeah.
and you could see that as, like, Lily, never really waking up the night
Mhm.
before, like, maybe she goes to a
Nina.
Nina never really waking up, like, she goes into a catatonic,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like psychosis
Yeah.
state,
Yeah.
in her bed in her own apartment. The second one that I think is more interesting is you assume Nina actually did stab herself in the fight with Lily. So
Mhm.
assuming that's true, the second and third act are totally hallucinated. It happens in her mind
Yeah.
and she's bleeding out in her dressing room.
Yeah.
The 3 things, or 4 things to support that. Number 1, and I noticed this
Oh,
while
and then Toma and Lily actually find her in her dressing room bleeding out, and he's just like she's like, and then he's like, "What did you do? What did you do?" But
Yes,
rather than being on stage.
exactly. So the first thing in the second act, the prince, after dropping Nina, but the prince blames Nina, and he goes like, "What the fuck?" Like, you
Yeah.
could see he was mad at her,
She hates herself
and
so
he
much, yeah.
and the prince stays pretty stone-faced throughout the movie when they're dancing throughout the first act up until the drop. The second act, the prince becomes overly enthusiastic. He
Mm.
says "bravo" to Nina in the
Mhm.
middle of the act, like,
Yeah.
he's like, "Bravo," like,
Yeah.
as they're walking off, which I don't see a ballet prince actually doing. Like, you stay in character until
Mhm.
you're completely off the stage. So that's one thing that I noticed the second time was like, that's a little bit off.
Wait, let me pause you right there. Like, it kind of makes so much sense too, because obviously she has a moment where like she has a freak out or something that messes up the whole thing. She falls. And Lily is again the representation of what she aspires to and like her self hatred in a way. So, like, the fact that Lily appeared in her dressing room being like, I'm going to take over now is just a reflection of her being so mad at herself for falling, for messing up,
Yeah.
that Lily appears to basically as her self-loathing self.
Yes. So the prince's demeanor changes drastically. Other people on the stage in the background, they're like, "Oh my God, Nina, like that was amazing."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like the dancers were never this
I
congratulatory to her
know.
during the movie.
Yeah.
The second thing, people throw flowers on stage after the second act, which is
Yeah.
super strange.
No,
And I was
yeah.
reading in the ballet forums that if you have flowers, it's like it's such a rare, like, it has to be the best performance in the history of
So
ballet to throw flowers on
right.
stage. Otherwise, you're going to the wings to
I
give the
was
dancers the
I was
flowers.
gonna say usually like they might be brought flowers and it usually is it's not the audience because the audience doesn't have a bunch of flowers
Yeah.
just like under their seat to throw. And it's usually when something special happens. So for example, if the principal dancer is named Étoile
Mhm.
in France, like one of the greatest, then they'll do something special like this. Well, they'll get flowers, or maybe if it's their last performance. But and sometimes, yeah, like for some, they still like bring it at the end and stuff. But like I agree, it's very rare, and it will never be after the second act. It's at the very, very end of the show while they're like doing their salute at
Yeah.
the end.
The audience goes crazy after the second act. So
Yeah,
there's still one act left, and there's dozens of bouquets thrown on stage.
yeah.
Super strange. Even the first time we watched this, I was like, that's very strange that
Mm-hmm.
they would throw flowers in the middle of the show.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like that would never happen. The third thing, after the second act, so going into the third act,
Yeah,
Nina is happy with her Black Swan performance. Nina makes out with Thomas in
yeah,
front of the other dancers.
yeah.
hard and passionately, like a
Yeah.
long makeout, 5 plus seconds. None of the other dancers react. No one's
Yeah.
like, "What the fuck is going on?" Like,
Yeah.
there's like 8 dancers around as, Nina and Toma are just making out passionately on the
Mhm.
side stage, and I was like, "That's a little bit weird." And then the 4th thing, if you assume that Nina stabbed herself and that the 2nd and 3rd acts are total hallucinations, the white light at the end represents her kind of being brought into the hospital and, like, the hospital, because you have the
Yes.
hospital lighting with Beth, like, everything's, like,
Yeah,
super
yeah,
bright.
yeah.
It's like her slipping into this catatonic psychosis state in the hospital with her being brought in
Yeah.
and the white light shining over her, so she's actually not on the stage. She's on, like, a hospital room mattress,
Yeah.
and the light is just overwhelming her. It symbolizes her, like, slipping into
Oh.
a psychotic
I like
state.
this theory.
Yeah.
I would even imagine, like, potentially what could have happened too is that she did stab herself, passed out. Imagine, like, in that state of, like, between, like, awake and unconscious, she imagined the second act with the Black Swan, and then maybe kind of went back, sort of woke up or came back to, like, consciousness in a way, realized that she stabbed herself, and maybe, like, did start prepare her makeup and stuff, and then, like, passed out again or something like this, and then there was this, and then that's when they discover her and take her to the hospital, maybe something like
Yeah.
that.
I think it's either
I like this theory most, to be honest.
I think it's either the first one we talked about where she doesn't stab herself and she hallucinates the blood and the stabbing, even her mom in the audience,
Mhm.
the reaction, and then the weird things we just talked about with the bouquets and making out with
Toma.
Toma, that's a hallucination in her mind. Like
Mhm.
it's a combination. Like she's dancing, but
Yeah,
she's
I think
also
it's
like,
like a reprosexuality feelings maybe towards him or something.
and in the second act, she also actually turns into the Black Swan on stage in her
Mhm.
own mind, and then the
Yeah.
camera pans around from the audience view, and you just see Nina normally, but in her mind, she like transforms into the Black Swan. So I think it could be like both, where she didn't stab herself, she's dancing, but she's also hallucinating all this shit, including the
Yeah.
blood at the end
Yeah.
that
It's
no one
possible
that
too.
no one
Like,
notices.
there's definitely wild amounts of hallucination, whether she's actually dancing and hallucinating or semi-unconscious and
Yeah.
hallucinating.
And then the one we just talked about where, yeah, she gets stabbed. She stabs herself after the first act, and she's just bleeding out in her dressing room, hallucinating, dancing the
Yeah.
second and third act. Then Toma and Lily come into her dressing room
Find her,
and are like,
yeah.
"What the fuck happened?"
Yeah.